Maya Rodriguez had been working at Murphy's Diner for almost 3 years now, and she knew every crack in the old tile floor by heart. The morning rush was starting, and she could already hear the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and eggs sizzling on the grill. She tied her apron around her waist and checked herself in the small mirror by the employee entrance one last time. The scar was still there, of course. It always would be. A jagged line that ran from just above her left eyebrow down to her jawline. A permanent reminder of that terrible day when she was 12. Her foster family's dog had attacked her without warning, and even after all these years and several surgeries, the mark remained clearly visible. Maya had learned to style her dark hair to partially cover it, but there was only so much she could hide. "Morning, Maya," called out Betty from behind the counter. Betty was the head waitress, a kind woman in her 50s, who had been working at Murphy's longer than anyone could remember. She was one of the few people who never seemed to notice the scar, or if she did, she never let it show. "Good morning, Betty. Looks like we're going to be busy today," Maya replied, grabbing her order pad and pen from the counter. The breakfast crowd was already filing in. Construction workers grabbed quick coffee and donuts before heading to job sites. Office workers in wrinkled shirts checked their phones while waiting for their usual orders. A few elderly regulars settled into their favorite booths, knowing Maya would bring them their coffee exactly how they liked it without being asked. Maya loved the regulars. Mrs. Patterson always ordered 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast, and she always asked about Maya's night classes. Old Mr. Frank got the same stack of pancakes every Tuesday and Thursday, and he always left a $5 tip even though his meal only cost $6. These were the customers who made the job worthwhile. But then there were the others. Maya was wiping down table 4 when she noticed a woman at table 6 making exaggerated gestures to her friend. The woman kept glancing in Maya's direction and whispering. Maya had developed a sixth sense about this kind of behavior over the years. She knew what was coming. When Maya approached their table with the coffee pot, the woman looked up with poorly concealed disgust. "Excuse me, could we possibly have a different server? Maybe the blonde one over there?" She pointed toward Betty, who was already handling 4 tables. Maya's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course. I'll let Betty know you'd prefer her service." This happened at least once a week. Sometimes people were more direct about it, making comments about her appearance or asking what happened to her face. Other times, like today, they just requested someone else without explanation. Maya had learned not to take it personally, but each incident still stung. She retreated to the kitchen and found Johnny, the cook, flipping burgers on the grill. Johnny was only a few years older than Maya, but he had been working at Murphy's since he was 16. He understood what it was like to be judged by appearance. His arms were covered in tattoos, and customers sometimes assumed the worst about him, too. "Rough table?" he asked, noticing her expression. "Table 6 wants Betty instead," Maya said, trying to sound casual. Johnny shook his head. "Their loss. You're the best server in this place, and anyone with half a brain can see that." Maya smiled gratefully. Johnny always knew what to say to make her feel better. She grabbed 2 plates from the pass and headed back out to the dining room. The lunch rush was always the hardest part of Maya's day. The diner got packed with people from the business district, and the atmosphere became more intense. Tips were better during lunch, but so was the pressure. People were in a hurry, demanding, and sometimes downright rude. Maya had learned to develop thick skin over the years. She could handle impatient customers, complicated orders, and even the occasional person who tried to stiff her on the tip. But the comments about her scar still got to her. They made her feel like she was 12 years old again, lying in a hospital bed while doctors discussed reconstruction surgery, and her foster parents whispered about how this would affect her future. What kept Maya going was her dream. Every night after work, she would sit at her tiny kitchen table in her studio apartment and count her tips. She had a mason jar where she kept all the money she was saving for culinary school. It was slow going on a waitress's salary, especially with rent and utilities to pay, but she was determined. Maya wanted to be a baker. She had discovered her love for baking during high school, when her home economics teacher had encouraged her to enter a local competition. Maya's chocolate chip cookies had won second place, and for the first time in years, she felt truly proud of something she had accomplished. The judges hadn't cared about her scar. They only cared about her cookies. Since then, Maya had taught herself everything she could about baking. She borrowed cookbooks from the library, watched free videos online, and practiced whenever she could afford ingredients. Her neighbors had gotten used to the smell of fresh bread coming from her apartment on weekends. The dream was to open her own small bakery someday. Nothing fancy, just a cozy place where people could get fresh bread, pastries, and maybe some coffee. Maya had it all planned out in her head. She would call it Maya's Kitchen, and she would create a warm, welcoming environment where everyone felt comfortable. But first, she needed to save enough money for culinary school. The program she wanted to attend cost almost $30,000, and even with financial aid, she would need to come up with at least half of that on her own. At her current rate of savings, it would take her at least 3 more years to have enough. Sometimes Maya wondered if she was fooling herself. Maybe dreams like hers weren't meant for people like her. Maybe she should just accept that she would spend the rest of her life serving other people's food, instead of creating her own. But then she would remember the taste of her grandmother's homemade tortillas, back before the accident, before everything changed. Her grandmother had died when Maya was 10, but she could still remember the way the old woman's eyes lit up when she was cooking. "Mija," her grandmother used to say, "food is love. When you cook with love, people can taste it." Maya carried that memory with her every day. It was what got her through the difficult customers, the long shifts, and the nights when she fell into bed exhausted and dreaming of a different life. She was wiping down the counter when her manager, Robert, approached with the schedule for next week. Robert was a decent boss, understanding about time off for school and flexible with shifts when Maya needed to study for exams. "Maya, I'm putting you on the day shift all next week. I know you prefer evenings, but Carol called in sick and won't be back until the following Monday." Maya nodded. Day shifts meant dealing with the lunch crowd every day, but they also meant better tips. Every extra dollar brought her closer to her goal. As the afternoon crowd began to thin out, Maya allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to get a little bit closer to her dream. Friday lunch rushes at Murphy's Diner were always chaotic, but this particular Friday felt different from the moment Maya clocked in. The morning rain had driven more people indoors than usual, and by 11:30 nearly every table was occupied. The air buzzed with conversation, clinking silverware, and the constant ding of the order bell from the kitchen. Maya had been moving non-stop for 2 hours, her feet already aching in her worn sneakers. She balanced 3 plates on one arm while carrying a coffee pot in her other hand, weaving between tables with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times before. Her section was completely full, and she could see Robert, the manager, seating more customers at table 12. Table 12 was in the center of her section, a large booth that could seat up to 6 people. As Maya finished delivering meals to table 9, she glanced over to see who had been seated there. 4 men in expensive-looking suits had settled into the booth, their voices already louder than most of the other customers. Their suits looked like they cost more than Maya made in 2 months, and their watches gleamed under the diner's fluorescent lights. Maya took a deep breath and grabbed 4 menus from the hostess station. She had learned over the years that wealthy customers could go either way. Some were incredibly generous with tips, while others treated service staff like they were invisible. She approached the table with her usual professional smile, despite the knot of anxiety that had formed in her stomach. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to Murphy's Diner. Can I start you off with some drinks today?" Maya placed the menus on the table and pulled out her order pad. The man closest to her, a heavy-set guy with slicked back hair and a gold tie clip, looked up at her, and his expression immediately changed. His eyes focused on the left side of her face, tracing the line of her scar from her forehead down to her jaw. Maya saw the familiar look of surprise followed by disgust cross his features. "Whoa, what happened to you?" he said loudly, causing conversations at nearby tables to pause. "Looks like someone took a knife to your face." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she kept her voice steady. "I'll give you a few more minutes to look over the menu if you'd like." But the man wasn't finished. He turned to his companions with a cruel grin. "Can you believe this? They've got Frankenstein serving food in here." His voice carried across the dining room, and Maya could feel dozens of eyes turning toward their table. One of his companions, a younger man with perfectly styled hair, laughed uncomfortably. "Come on, Keith, that's enough." But Keith was just getting started. He seemed to feed off the attention he was drawing from other customers. "No, seriously. I'm paying good money for lunch here. Shouldn't we get service from someone who won't scare away our appetites? He gestured dismissively at Maya. Maybe they keep her around for Halloween decorations. The third man, older with graying temples, looked embarrassed. Keith, you're being inappropriate. Keith ignored him completely. I mean, seriously, what restaurant puts someone who looks like that out front? It's bad for business. I wouldn't bring my clients to a place like this if I knew I'd have to look at. He waved his hand vaguely in Maya's direction. Maya felt like the entire restaurant had gone silent, even though she knew people were still talking and eating. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she gripped her order pad tighter to hide it. She had dealt with rude customers before, but never anything this public or this cruel. I apologize for any inconvenience, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Would you prefer a different server? This seemed to amuse Keith even more. Oh, she talks and so polite too. That's sweet, honey, but the damage is already done. We can't unsee what we've seen. The fourth man, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. Keith, you need to stop this right now. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? Keith's voice rose even higher. Look around, buddy. Half the people in here are staring at her, not me. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Maya could feel tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people. She had spent years building up her confidence, learning to hold her head high despite her scar. But Keith's words were tearing down all of that progress in a matter of minutes. I'll get Betty to take your order, Maya managed to say, backing away from the table. Betty better not look like you, Keith called after her, causing another round of uncomfortable laughter from some of the other customers. Maya hurried toward the kitchen, her face burning with humiliation. She could hear whispers following her as she walked, and she knew that everyone in the restaurant had witnessed what just happened. Some customers looked away when she passed, while others stared openly. In the kitchen, Johnny was plating an order when he saw Maya rush in. He immediately noticed her distressed expression and set down his spatula. Maya, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya couldn't trust herself to speak without crying, so she just shook her head and pointed toward the dining room. Johnny wiped his hands on his apron and walked to the kitchen service window to see what was happening. He could see Keith still, talking loudly, gesturing toward the kitchen where Maya had disappeared. The other customers at nearby tables were trying to pretend they weren't listening, but it was obvious that everyone was uncomfortable with the situation. That piece of garbage at table 12? Johnny asked, his voice tight with anger. Maya nodded, finally finding her voice. He called me Frankenstein in front of everyone. He said I was bad for business. Johnny's hands clenched into fists. I ought to go out there and teach that guy some manners. No, Johnny, please, Maya said quickly. I can't afford to lose this job. Just ask Betty to take their table. I need a minute. Maya walked toward the small employee bathroom at the back of the kitchen, passing the prep station where the dishwasher, Carlos, was working. Carlos had always been kind to Maya, and he looked up with concern when he saw her face. ¿Estás bien, Maya? He asked softly. Maya just nodded and slipped into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She stared at herself in the cracked mirror above the sink, seeing her scar as if for the first time. The fluorescent light seemed to make it more prominent, more obvious. She traced the line with her finger, remembering all the surgeries, all the physical therapy, all the times she had been told she was lucky to be alive. For a moment, she let herself cry. Not the loud, dramatic sobs that might draw attention, but the quiet, heartbroken tears of someone whose spirit had been crushed in public. She thought about all the progress she had made, all the confidence she had built up over the years. Keith had destroyed it in less than 5 minutes. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, Maya remembered something her grandmother used to tell her. Mija, people who try to make others feel small are usually the smallest people of all. Keith might have expensive clothes and a loud voice, but he was small inside. Maya refused to let someone that small define her worth. She splashed cold water on her face, straightened her apron, and took a deep breath. There were still customers who needed service, and she wasn't going to let Keith's cruelty stop her from doing her job or pursuing her dreams. While Maya was in the bathroom composing herself, A man sitting alone in the corner booth had witnessed the entire cruel exchange at table 12. James Rivera had been quietly sipping his coffee and reading the morning newspaper when Keith's loud voice had drawn his attention away from the sports section. James was not the kind of person who stood out in a crowd. He wore a simple gray sweater that had seen better days, faded jeans, and well-worn sneakers. His car in the parking lot was a 10-year-old Honda with a small dent in the rear bumper. To anyone looking at him, James appeared to be just another regular customer enjoying a quiet lunch at Murphy's Diner. But appearances could be deceiving. James Rivera was the founder and CEO of Rivera Hospitality Group, a company that owned 43 restaurants across 5 states. What had started as a single food truck 20 years ago had grown into a multi-million-dollar empire. James was worth more money than most people could imagine, but he had never forgotten where he came from. As a child, James had struggled with a severe stutter that made him the target of bullies throughout elementary and middle school. Kids would imitate the way he spoke, making cruel jokes about his attempts to order food or answer questions in class. The experience had left deep scars that were invisible to the eye, but had shaped every aspect of who James had become as an adult. Now, watching Keith humiliate Maya in front of the entire restaurant, James felt a familiar anger burning in his chest. It was the same feeling he had experienced as a 12-year-old boy, standing in the school cafeteria, while older kids mocked his stutter and called him names. The only difference was that now he had the power to do something about it. James had been coming to Murphy's Diner every Friday for the past 6 months, always sitting in the same corner booth, always ordering the same simple meal. It was his way of staying connected to regular people and remembering his roots. Most of his business associates preferred expensive restaurants with celebrity chefs and wine lists that cost more than most people made in a week. But James found peace in places like Murphy's, where the food was honest and the people were real. He had noticed Maya from his very first visit, not because of her scar, but because of the way she treated every customer with genuine kindness. He had watched her remember the coffee preferences of regular customers, patiently explain menu items to elderly diners who couldn't read the small print, and always maintain her composure even when dealing with difficult people. James had built his business empire on the belief that hospitality was about making people feel valued and welcome. He had seen Maya demonstrate those exact qualities week after week, which made Keith's attack on her even more infuriating. When Maya disappeared into the kitchen, James noticed how the atmosphere in the entire restaurant had changed. Customers who had been enjoying their meals were now uncomfortable, picking at their food and speaking in hushed tones. Keith and his companions were still talking loudly, seemingly oblivious to the fact that their behavior had ruined the dining experience for everyone around them. James watched as Betty, the older waitress, reluctantly approached table 12 to take their order. Even Betty, who had probably dealt with every type of difficult customer imaginable, looked nervous as she approached Keith's table. James could see her hands trembling slightly as she pulled out her order pad. "Finally, someone who doesn't look like a horror movie reject," Keith announced loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. Betty's face flushed with embarrassment, but she maintained her professional demeanor as she took their order. After Betty left their table, Keith continued making crude comments about Maya to his companions. James noticed that the other 3 men seemed increasingly uncomfortable with Keith's behavior, but none of them had the courage to tell him to stop. James recognized the dynamic. Keith was obviously the alpha of their group, probably their boss or biggest client, and the others were afraid to challenge him. When Maya finally emerged from the kitchen, James studied her carefully. Her eyes were slightly red, suggesting she had been crying, but she had composed herself and was ready to return to work. James watched as she approached a table of elderly customers who had been waiting patiently for their check. Despite everything that had just happened to her, Maya smiled warmly at the couple and asked if they had enjoyed their meal. The elderly woman reached out and patted Maya's hand gently. "You're such a sweet girl, dear. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." It was clear that the woman had witnessed Keith's cruel behavior and wanted Maya to know that not everyone judged her by her appearance. Maya's smile became more genuine as she thanked the woman. James saw her shoulders straighten slightly, as if the kindness of that one customer had helped restore some of her confidence. For the next hour, James continued to observe Maya as she went about her work. He watched her deliver food to families with young children, patiently clean up spills without complaint, and laugh at an elderly man's corny jokes. Despite the humiliation she had endured, Maya treated every customer with the same warmth and professionalism that had caught James's attention in the first place. James had built his career on recognizing talent, and he could see that Maya possessed something special. It wasn't just her work ethic or her customer service skills, though those were impressive. It was her resilience, her ability to bounce back from adversity and continue giving her best to others even when she was hurting inside. As James finished his meal, he found himself thinking about his own journey from a stuttering kid with a food truck to the owner of a successful restaurant chain. He remembered all the people who had helped him along the way: the bank manager who had approved his first small business loan, the food critic who had written a positive review of his struggling restaurant, the mentor who had taught him the importance of treating employees like family. James had always believed in paying it forward, in using his success to create opportunities for others. His company had a scholarship program that helped promising young people attend culinary school, and he regularly promoted hardworking employees to management positions regardless of their background or education level. But watching Maya continue to work with grace and dignity after being publicly humiliated made James realize that he had found someone truly extraordinary. Here was a person who embodied everything he valued in the hospitality industry: kindness, resilience, and genuine care for others. When Maya finally approached his table to refill his coffee, James looked up at her with kind eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've provided excellent service as always." Maya seemed surprised by the compliment, especially after what had happened earlier. "Thank you, sir. Is there anything else I can get for you?" "Actually, yes," James said, pulling out his business card. "I own several restaurants and I'm always looking for people with your level of professionalism. Would you be interested in hearing about some opportunities?" Maya stared at the business card reading, "James Rivera, CEO, Rivera Hospitality Group," printed in simple black letters. She had never heard of the company, but something about James's sincere demeanor made her trust him. I don't understand," Maya said quietly. James smiled gently. "I've been watching how you handle yourself, especially today. You have exactly the kind of character I look for in people I want to work with." 2 weeks had passed since James Rivera had given Maya his business card at Murphy's Diner. Maya had stared at that small white card every night, turning it over in her hands and wondering if she had imagined the entire conversation. A part of her was afraid to call the number, worried that it might be some kind of cruel joke or that she had misunderstood what James had meant. But another part of her, the part that dreamed of owning her own bakery someday, whispered that this might be the break she had been waiting for. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Maya gathered enough courage to make the phone call. The voice that answered was professional but warm. "Rivera Hospitality Group, this is Linda speaking. How can I help you?" Maya's throat felt dry as she spoke. "Hi, my name is Maya Rodriguez. James Rivera gave me his card and told me to call about opportunities." "Oh yes, Maya. Mr. Rivera has been expecting your call. He's actually free right now if you'd like to speak with him." Before Maya could change her mind, she was transferred to James's office. His familiar, gentle voice came through the phone. "Maya, I'm so glad you called. I was hoping you would. Are you available to come in for a conversation this week? I'd like to discuss something that might interest you." That's how Maya found herself on Thursday afternoon, standing in front of a sleek glass building in downtown Portland, wearing her only professional outfit, a navy blue dress she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for a job interview that hadn't gone well. The Rivera Hospitality Group offices were on the 15th floor, and as the elevator climbed higher, Maya's nerves grew stronger. The receptionist, Linda, was the same warm voice from the phone. She led Maya to a comfortable waiting area with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. Maya had never been this high up in a building before, and she found herself momentarily distracted by the sight of tiny cars moving along the streets below. "Maya Rodriguez?" James Rivera appeared in the doorway of his office, and Maya was surprised to see him wearing the same type of simple clothes he had worn at the diner. She had expected a fancy suit, but James wore khakis and a button-down shirt that looked like it came from a regular department store. His office was nothing like what Maya had imagined either. Instead of intimidating leather furniture and expensive artwork, it was decorated simply with photos of restaurants and food trucks. A bookshelf held cookbooks mixed with business books, and there was a small coffee station in the corner with a regular coffee maker, not some fancy espresso machine. "Please sit down," James said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "Can I get you some coffee, water?" Maya accepted a glass of water, mainly because her mouth felt so dry she wasn't sure she could speak clearly. James sat across from her, and his expression was the same kind one she remembered from the diner. "Maya, I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself," James began. "When I was growing up, I had a severe stutter. Speaking was incredibly difficult for me, and I was bullied constantly because of it. Kids would make fun of how I talked, imitate me, and exclude me from activities because they thought I was different." Maya listened intently, surprised by James's openness about something so personal. "What I witnessed at the diner 2 weeks ago brought back a lot of painful memories for me," James continued. "But more than that, it showed me something remarkable about your character. Despite being humiliated in public, you continued to treat every other customer with kindness and professionalism. That takes incredible strength." Maya felt her eyes beginning to water. No one had ever described what she did as strength before. "I've been in the restaurant business for 20 years, James went on. "I started with a single food truck and built my company by focusing on one simple principle: treat people with dignity and respect. That's exactly what I saw you do, even when you weren't being treated that way yourself." James leaned forward slightly. "Maya, I've done some research and I know you're taking night classes and working toward your goals. I also know that the path you're on is going to take a very long time. What if I told you there was a faster way?" Maya's heart started beating faster. "I don't understand." "My company has a program for exceptional individuals in the hospitality industry," James explained. "We provide full scholarships to culinary management programs along with paid internships at our restaurants. After completion, we guarantee management positions within our company, with opportunities for advancement based on performance." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You mean you would pay for me to go to culinary school?" "Not just culinary school. This is a comprehensive program that includes business management, restaurant operations, financial planning, and leadership training. It's designed to prepare people for executive positions in the hospitality industry." Maya's mind was spinning. This seemed too good to be true. "But why me?" "You barely know me," James smiled. "Maya, I've been in this business long enough to recognize genuine talent when I see it. But more importantly, I've learned that technical skills can be taught. Character cannot. You have something that can't be learned in any classroom: the ability to maintain your dignity and treat others with kindness, even when you're facing adversity." I don't know what to say," Maya whispered. "There's more," James continued. "The program also includes a small business development track. If your dream is to open your own bakery someday, we can help make that happen too. We have partnerships with banks for startup loans, connections with suppliers, and a network of mentors who can guide you through the process of starting your own business." Maya felt overwhelmed. For 3 years she had been putting every spare dollar into her mason jar, slowly saving toward a dream that seemed impossibly far away. Now James was offering her everything she had been working toward and more. "I need to ask," Maya said quietly, "is this because you feel sorry for me? Because of what happened at the diner?" James shook his head firmly. "Maya, this is because I recognize exceptional potential when I see it. What happened at the diner just made me realize that I needed to act quickly before someone else discovered how valuable you are." He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. "These are the program details. I don't need an answer today, but I hope you'll consider it. The next cohort starts in 6 weeks, and there's a spot available if you want it." Maya took the folder with trembling hands. The papers inside outlined everything James had described: full tuition coverage, living stipend during the program, guaranteed employment afterward, and mentorship for future business ownership. "James," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper, "this would change my entire life." "That's the idea," James replied with a warm smile. "Maya, everyone deserves a chance to reach their full potential. Sometimes all it takes is someone believing in you and providing the right opportunity." As Maya left the Rivera Hospitality Group offices that afternoon, clutching the folder against her chest, she felt like she was floating. The girl who had been humiliated 2 weeks ago was being offered the chance of a lifetime by a successful businessman who saw past her scar to recognize her true worth. For the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to believe that her dreams might actually come true. 18 months later, Maya stood in front of a small storefront on Maple Street, holding a set of silver keys in her hand. The morning sun cast a warm glow across the freshly painted sign that read, Maya's Corner Bakery, in elegant script letters. She could hardly believe this moment was real. The transformation had been remarkable, but it hadn't been easy. The culinary management program that James had sponsored was intensive and demanding.
Maya had spent 12 months learning everything from advanced baking techniques to business accounting, from staff management to supply chain logistics.
There were nights when she fell into bed exhausted, wondering if she was smart enough to keep up with the other students. But James had been right about her character being her greatest asset. While some of her classmates struggled with the pressure, Maya's experience dealing with difficult customers and maintaining grace under stress served her well. Her instructors noticed how she naturally took on leadership roles during group projects and how other students came to her for support when they were struggling. The physical changes in Maya were obvious to anyone who had known her before. She stood taller now with confidence that radiated from within. She had learned to style her hair in a way that didn't hide her scar, but rather incorporated it as part of her unique appearance. The scar was still there, of course, but it no longer defined her. Instead of being something she tried to conceal, it had become a symbol of her resilience. Maya inserted the key into the lock and pushed open the door to her bakery. The space was small but perfect. Just 8 tables, a display case for pastries, and an open kitchen where customers could watch her work. She had designed every detail herself, from the warm yellow walls to the mismatched vintage chairs she had found at estate sales. The bell above the door chimed as someone entered behind her. Maya turned to see James walking in, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a proud smile. "Good morning, boss," he said, handing her one of the cups. "Ready for your grand opening?" Maya laughed. It still felt strange to hear James call her boss, but that's exactly what she had become. After completing the program with the highest grades in her class, Maya had been offered a management position at one of James's flagship restaurants. But her heart had remained set on opening her own bakery, and James had helped make that dream a reality too. Through Rivera Hospitality Group's small business development program, Maya had secured a startup loan, negotiated a lease on the perfect space, and connected with suppliers who could provide high-quality ingredients at reasonable prices. James had also introduced her to other successful restaurant owners who had become informal mentors, sharing advice about everything from managing cash flow to dealing with health inspectors. "I think I'm ready," Maya said, taking a sip of coffee and looking around her bakery one more time. The display case was filled with pastries she had baked since 4 in the morning, croissants, muffins, cinnamon rolls, and her signature chocolate chip cookies that had won that contest in high school so many years ago. At exactly 8 o'clock, Maya flipped the sign on her door from closed to open. Within minutes, her first customer walked in, Mrs. Patterson, the elderly regular from Murphy's Diner who had always ordered 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast. "Maya, dear," Mrs. Patterson exclaimed, looking around the bakery with delight. "I heard through the grapevine that you were opening your own place. I'm so proud of you." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she hugged the older woman. "Mrs. Patterson, you were always so kind to me at Murphy's. What can I get for you today?" "I'll have one of everything," Mrs. Patterson said with a wink. "I want to try it all." The morning flew by in a blur of customers, many of whom Maya recognized from her days at Murphy's Diner. Johnny, the cook, stopped by during his break and bought a dozen cookies for the staff. Betty brought her entire family for lunch and declared Maya's sandwiches the best she had ever tasted. Even Robert, her former manager, came by to congratulate her and order pastries for the diner. But it was around noon when Maya's most unexpected customer walked through the door. Keith, the businessman who had humiliated her 18 months ago, entered the bakery talking loudly on his phone. He had obviously gained some weight since their last encounter, and his expensive suit looked a bit tighter than Maya remembered. Keith ended his phone call and approached the counter, studying the menu board without really looking at Maya. His eyes were focused on his phone screen, scrolling through emails as he spoke. "Yeah, "Give me a large coffee and whatever that chocolate thing is in the case," he said dismissively, still not making eye contact. Maya felt her heart racing, but not from fear this time. She was curious to see if Keith would recognize her. She prepared his order carefully, placing the chocolate croissant on a small plate and filling a cup with fresh coffee. "That'll be $8.50, Maya said, her voice steady and professional. Keith finally looked up from his phone to hand her a $10 bill, and his eyes met Maya's face for the first time. Maya watched as confusion crossed his features, followed by a spark of recognition. "Wait a minute," Keith said slowly, his eyes focusing on Maya's scar. "Don't I know you from somewhere?" Maya smiled calmly and handed him his change. "I don't think so, but I hope you enjoy your pastry. Have a wonderful day." Keith took his order but lingered at the counter, clearly trying to place where he had seen Maya before. Finally, he shrugged and found a seat at one of the small tables by the window. Maya watched from behind the counter as Keith took his first bite of the chocolate croissant. His expression changed immediately from indifference to surprise, then to genuine appreciation. He took another bite, then another, clearly enjoying every mouthful. When Keith brought his empty plate back to the counter, his demeanor had completely changed. "That was incredible," he said sincerely. "I've eaten at some of the best restaurants in the city, and that croissant was better than anything I've had. Did you make it yourself?" "I did," Maya replied. "Thank you for the compliment. It means a lot." Keith pulled out his business card. "Listen, I organize a lot of business lunches and client meetings. Would you be interested in catering some events? I could bring you a lot of business." Maya looked at the card, then back at Keith's eager face. The irony was not lost on her. The man who had once called her a horror movie reject was now asking for her business services. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said diplomatically, "but I'm focusing on building my neighborhood customer base right now." As Keith left the bakery, shaking his head in amazement at the quality of the food, Maya realized that this moment represented everything her journey had been about. She no longer needed validation from people like Keith. She had built something beautiful and meaningful through her own hard work and the support of people who saw her true worth. The rest of the day continued with steady customers' warm compliments and the satisfying feeling of dreams becoming reality. As Maya locked up that evening, she looked back at her bakery one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight she was simply grateful. Maya Rodriguez had come a long way from the scared waitress who used to hide her scar and count tips in a mason jar. She had become exactly who she was meant to be,